So welcome to this webinar, which is around how to protect your hardware from a security standpoint. And actually, we have two people today for this webinar. Myself, Anais Gurruchaga, working as security product lead at HP, and Corbett Hoxland. I will let Corbett introduce himself, and then we can get he can get started with the webinar, with the presentation. Corbett, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good day, depending on where in the world you are today. By way of introduction, my name is Corbett Hoxland, and I look after all things security related from a business development standpoint. And one of the things that I really love about security is how prevalent it is in everything that we do today. So what we're going to do is I wanted to ask you a quick question around why did you attend this session in particular? The reason I'm asking this question is that most folks typically think that a software antivirus solution is enough. So if you could just let me know in the chat window why you joined this session, I'd love to get a quick pulse of what people are thinking. We'll give it about 30 seconds. Don't worry if you're just looking at this from an informational point of view, we will continue, so don't worry too much about it. All right, no problem. So let's get started then. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to chat to you about the workforce. As we know, the workforce is getting younger and younger, as well as older and older. And what that does is it poses a couple of interesting challenges for us, as we need to cater to both a younger, less experienced, as well as an older, more experienced workforce. The interesting part now is this workforce no longer has a place called the office. The office or the workplace has completely changed over the last 10 years. And what we are seeing today is that the workplace can be anything and anywhere, and more importantly, at any time. And this introduces a number of interesting challenges for us, especially as it impacts the way a lot of folks work. Now, historically, when I went to the office, I would walk into a building, I would scan my card in, and I was protected by a turnstile, a couple of elevators, a couple of locked and secure doors, and maybe a security guard. More importantly, I was inside of a building that nobody else could access. If I'm able to work from a coffee shop, if I'm able to work from the airport, if I can work from anywhere at any time, those physical security measures are no longer relevant. In fact, if we go digital, the digital security that I had in place, my firewalls, my network access protection policies and stuff like that, those are no longer applicable either because, well, I'm outside of the network. The firewall is something I'm outside of as well. So when I look into the environment, I'm a complete and utter outsider. And these are just physical attacks that we're talking about here. When I talk hardware security here, we're looking at what can we do to not only protect the physical hardware, but how do we protect your data? Now, a lot of you folks are aware that when it comes to security, we follow the CIA triangle: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. An attack can be as simple as, let me make sure that your data is unavailable. So let me show you what we're doing around this. If we look at 2017, we're still waiting for the year in review when it comes to this year, but what we are seeing is that cyber attacks on end user devices actually doubled. And this is interesting because more and more folks are being mobile, more and more folks are working outside of the office. This makes sense. My favorite statistic, the one that I absolutely adore, is the last one. Typically, when we talk about end user devices, and we say, guys, what are you doing around security? Everybody's quick to raise their hand and say, I'm using the latest and greatest software antivirus program that's available. It's got this capability, it's got this capability, and it's fantastic and awesome. I'm not taking a swing at all at software software solutions, I'm just saying they need help. So the first question I have then is I like to say, okay, if we are relying or depending a great deal on software antivirus solutions, fantastic. How often do you update those antivirus solutions? The typical response for a very, very good customer is typically once every 2 days. On average, we're seeing about once a week. And for a poor customer, or let me rephrase, not a poor, for a immature customer from a cybersecurity standpoint, you're seeing once every 2-3 weeks or as needed. The challenge with that, according to GData malware trends for 2017, a new virus or a new malware variant was discovered every 4.2 seconds. To put that into perspective, the second I start updating my antivirus definition file on whatever product I'm using, it's already outdated. Just think about that. Started and it's already outdated. So clearly this isn't working for us. So we need to do something a little bit more. And to help folks do more, the EU came out with a GDPR regulation. Now, everybody's been talking about this. Everyone's been giving their own opinions and thoughts around this, and fantastic for everyone out there. But the things I want you to focus on now, if and when you get breached, there are rules that you need to adhere to. If you don't, there are penalties. In summary, where I like to summarize GDPR for a lot of folks now, cybersecurity has a real-world cost to it. If we get this wrong, people are losing their jobs, and in some cases are losing a little bit more. So I want to take this a little bit further. If we look at the risks that are apparent to our customers, we're going to see the usual guys out there. We're going to see phishing attacks are only growing in popularity. We are seeing that the number of breaches involving a poor or default password amazes me, but it's still one of the biggest attacks that we have out there. I think they just released the worst password of 2018. And for the 5th year running, the worst password ever is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, followed closely by the password being password. So these are the things that we can't really use technology to solve this with, because our customers, our end users need help. So what are we going to do about this? What can we do about this? Now, here's something we've been tracking for quite a while. We're calling it visual hacking. So earlier on, we were talking about how my office is anywhere and anytime. So if my office is the airport or a coffee shop, how difficult is it for somebody to walk past my computer and just stand behind me and look at what I'm typing? Think of an airplane. Think about how cozy and close everyone is sitting, and how often you and your competitors are on the exact same flight, going to the exact same customer to give your version of the exact same pitch. If your competitors can just sit behind you and look over your shoulder and see exactly what you're typing, what the pricing is, what your value proposition is, what your key differentiators are, they can easily pick that apart. And it's no more advanced than just having the right place to sit. So end user security, like I said earlier, a lot of folks keep relying on our software antivirus. But let's take a look at this. Why is it so important? And why do we need to evolve how we protect end user computing devices? So in the past, what we had was our secure network. This was typically a data center. This was typically a bunch of servers inside of a server room, and all of my data was sitting in that room, safe and secure, protected by my access control lists, protected by my firewall, my antivirus, and a whole host of physical security measures. Fantastic, bravo, well done. All of my computers were typically inside the environment, and I could do my work without worrying at all. Then came the internet, then came mobility, and that expanded my world a great deal. Now I had people with computers that were working inside and outside of the office, that were supposed to have access from outside the office to attend or to connect to data inside my office. Now I needed to start thinking about, how do I differentiate a legitimate user from a hacker? from a unauthorized user. How do I do all of that? And then the interesting part became, even though I'm completely protected and my firewall is doing a fantastic job, if any one of my many devices is breached, what is the impact? So think about this. We have our data center. We have all of our servers protected and maintained and updated, and everything is wonderful. My one computer, my one end user, that's easy to protect, wonderful, great. But what if I have 5, 50, 1,000 end user devices, think laptops, notebooks, whatever you want to call them, that are inside and outside of my environment? Devices that are getting updated on an irregular basis, that are receiving antivirus updates at intermittent intervals. And what we're looking at here is a problem waiting to happen. So we had a look at this and said, all right, what else can we do? What can we do to break the cycle? Because every time we make an advancement in the cybersecurity software realm, the cyber criminals come up with a better way of doing it. I mean, we're now looking at fileless attacks where no antivirus definition file can even help me. What more can I do around this? So our approach was to say, look, what exactly is an end user device? Typically, when we say, look, my computer is safe and protected, we think of a notebook, a desktop, etc. But as the recent attacks have happened, we're starting to notice that an end user device should also include the printer. And the reason I say this is easy. The printers of 20 years ago were nice, dumb terminals that just spat out paper with a whole bunch of data on top of it. The printers of today have pretty much the exact same hardware as your typical computer. So we're talking, they have hard drives where we can store data or we can copy data to and from. They have their own version of an operating system where I can install applications to and from. They have network access with usernames, with email addresses, with internet access. So in summary, folks, it might not run Windows, but today's printer looks a hell of a lot like a computer. Interesting story this week was there is a YouTube celebrity named PewDiePie or something to that effect. And this person has been the number one YouTube celebrity for a couple of years now. He is about to be surpassed by an Indian music company, and his fans got together, and believe it or not, they were able to hack 5,000 printers across the world. And what they were there to do is they were able to hack these devices using default usernames and passwords, and they were able to print out papers saying, please support whoever it is because he's the number one YouTube celebrity and we want to keep you there. While that's all funny and cute, imagine if that message wasn't so peaceful. Imagine if that message was filled with hate speech. Imagine the damage that somebody could do if they're able to breach all of your printers. Not only print out anything they want, but copy sensitive information that has already been printed to those devices. What data can I pull off of those devices? Things become a little bit more interesting when I look at a printer from that lens, and I sit there and go, you know what? That's not a dumb terminal anymore. So let's have a look at the types of attacks that we're looking at a PC and why we're focusing on hardware. Typically, most folks are going to talk about this is what we are doing to protect the computer inside of the operating system. This part of here, the common target. And typically what folks are going to do there is they're going to say, let's load the latest antivirus, let's make sure it's updated, and let's do our patch management. Most of the time, that's okay. That's a good place to start. But we need to do more. What you'll see is we'll be chatting about this in a lot more detail, but the new wave of attacks we are seeing now realize that the operating system is pretty well maintained. So if I can go underneath the operating system, what can I do then? So there was an article a couple of weeks ago from Bloomberg talking about how servers purchased by both Amazon and Apple had been compromised. And the compromise was easy. All the folks did, somewhere in the supply chain, somebody was able to attach a chip to the motherboard And they were able to say, this little chip will send data to and from this server to my host somewhere in the world. Amazon and Apple have said, look, this is nonsense. You need to take down this article and apologize. Bloomberg, in response, has cited they have 17 sources that have confirmed this attack has existed. The thing that I want you to bear in mind is whether this is true or not, this is what's going to start becoming reality. If I can attach anything to your device, physically attach it, you've got problems. Because what happens is, as soon as I switch on my machine, my BIOS loads, and my BIOS is great. Everything underneath me, aka the hardware, is supposed to be there, has been confirmed. I'm good to go. Let me load up, and there I go. The BIOS has a look and says, all right, everything's in place, everything's working the way it should. Operating system, Windows, Linux, Mac, here you go crazy. At this stage in the process, only now does your antivirus solutions kick in, does your firewall kick in? Because until this stage, everything is protected, or so we thought. So if my security strategy is only sitting in the software layer, I've got a problem because, as we know, software can be switched off, software can be disabled, and software can quite easily be misconfigured. All right, so that's the software component. As we were talking earlier, what happens when all hell does break loose? I mean, how do I stop my device from being visually hacked? How do I stop my device from being stolen? What are some things that I can do around this to protect my device a little bit more than I've got an antivirus solution running? Folks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bit of a breather and I'm going to hand over to Anais, who's going to walk you through all of the solutions that we're looking at from a hardware standpoint. Anais, over to you.
Thank you, Corbett. So as Corbett just explained to you, there are different ways and different vectors to attack a system and to get in. What we're seeing as a trend indeed is that, as Corbett mentioned, most of the attacks were happening into the operating system, the most common target. But what we're seeing also as a trend now is that, and what we're expecting to see even growing, is that the attacks will go more and more below the operating system, and that's in the BIOS and at the firmware level. So again, the most secure place in your PC is the hardware. So that means that if we take it, let's say, the other way around, when you're looking at security of your endpoint device, whether it is a printer, whether it is a laptop or any other type of device, that means that the most secure type of device that you can get needs to start at the place that is most secure in your device, and that's the hardware. So ideally, you need to have security that starts in an actual piece of hardware, an actual chip, like a security controller, that will know how your system should act and react, that should know how a correct authenticate BIOS looks like, that should know what a correct operating system or image should look like. And that would then in turn be able to detect if anything goes wrong, be able to alert you if anything goes wrong, and then of course be able to set the system back into its original state. And this can only happen if you start your security in the hardware. It creates a root of trust because it is in the most secure place in your device. Corbett mentioned a certain number of attacks, but let me show you a bit more of what we're talking about and give you some concrete examples. When we're looking at 2017, there's a certain number of attacks that happened. In blue, you can see names of some attacks like Wannacry, Shamoon, that was the version 2, NotPetya, and I'll cover those into a bit more details. They have been impacting lots of different organizations. And in yellow, you can see some specific organizations, companies that have been hit by even other types of attacks. And what you can see looking at that is that attacks have evolved. They've evolved in the sense that they are not targeting one specific type of organization. They are not targeting small or big companies. The attacks happen for any type of organizations, any type of industry. And this is also something that we see evolving in terms of trends, is that the attacks are more and more destructive. So just to look at very specific examples, I'd like to take you through some of those, like Wannacry and NotPetya, and what it is that we're talking about. So Wannacry is or was a ransomware. So basically, you're getting a message, a pop-up message on your screen asking you to pay a certain amount of money if you want to be able to access your system. In this case, the ransomware was using a vulnerability of a Windows server. So it was spreading through Eternal Blue. And what was quite impressive about Wannacry is that it impacted in just 4 days over 300,000 computers, which is absolutely huge. But here, the hackers made very little money. When hackers put out a ransomware, you would expect that the first motivation is to make money, but one of the main motivations is actually to destroy data or to put business at risk. And in this case, I took just one example, but there are multiple examples of how Wannacry hit different types of organizations. In the UK, Wannacry hit hospitals, and you can see there a certain number of numbers and data points. So here we're not only talking about amounts of money that are lost, we're also talking about the lives of people put at risk, because there was no more access to computers, to data. So everything was back to pen and paper. Surgeries back to pen and paper. Hospitals diverting emergency cars. Now, one key point here is the date of the patch. So basically, this vulnerability was known, and there was a patch, there was a fix for this vulnerability, which was made available in April 2017. And the attack happened in May 2017. That really shows two things. One, the importance of patching, so basically of applying updates regularly. And the second thing is, Wannacry came in through different ways, but one of the ways was through an email. That was by clicking on the link, it was redirecting people to a corrupt website. So here also, the other point is you need to make sure that you have a way to browse safely. Today, there are solutions which enable to contain a virus or a malware when you're browsing on the internet. Those types of solutions are accessible, and those are types of solutions that could be implemented. Now that was Wannacry. An even stronger ransomware was NotPetya. It was actually using the same vulnerability as Wannacry, and if you look at the dates of patch and attack, they're pretty close. Well, the date of the patch is of course the same because it was using the same vulnerability. And the date of the attack was June 2017. So what we've seen here is there was a first version of the ransomware, Wannacry, and then there was another version. It was not exactly the same attack, but it was using the same vulnerability. So a different variant, more impactful. In this case, the malware was hidden in a hacked version of a major accounting system that was used by all companies that were filing their tax returns. And here the example that you can see is there was a transportation company that was hit, meaning 45,000 PCs went down, 4,000 servers. You see the revenue loss of $300 million, 10 days to reinstall everything, the full infrastructure. But that's only one of them. There were lots of other companies that were impacted. Pharmaceutical company, oil producing company, steel producer. So very different types of companies and of organizations. So Here, I think the takeaway on top of the importance of applying updates and of browsing safely is the fact that once you've been hit and you need to re-image all your endpoint devices, all your PCs, you need to be able to do it in an automated way, in a quick way, in a fast way, and be able to manage that remotely. A lot of the times, so when organizations are hit by those types of attacks, there's a lot of manual intervention, but there are solutions existing that that can do that automatically, and those should be used. Continuing on different type of attack, Equifax. So this attack has basically the name of the organization, a credit company that was hit by the attack. And here what was stolen was credential data. So earlier on, Corbett shared with you what are some of the main passwords, like the very simple word password. So having strong passwords, of course, is helping prevent some of the data breaches. Here again, you see some of the impacts. The first part, $439 million, 143 million people in the US impacted. It turns out now that this number has grown even to over $145 million. And what type of data was stolen? What you see here, so credit card numbers, but not only that, names, social security numbers, birthdates, addresses, driver's licenses, all kinds of information that can be extremely useful for hackers and that can sell quite well on the black market. Again, in this case, there was a patch available, March 2017, and the attack happened in July 2017. So patching is important. But where I would like to draw your attention to is also that strengthening your logon is absolutely crucial. So having strong passwords is one thing. Implementing solutions where you are able to authenticate using multiple factors, simultaneous multiple factors, that will make your logon about 1 million times more secure. So what am I talking about? You can have a password, something that you know, you can have, or a PIN, which is something that you know. And at the same time, you could use something that you are, like a fingerprint, or use your face for facial recognition. You could use something that you have, like a contactless card. So using simultaneously 2 or 3 factors at the same time will definitely make your security stronger. And the last type of attack I want to mention is a BIOS level attack, because again, attacks happening at that level are some of the most damageable ones. So there are a couple of examples that happened from the past. So Shamoon and Shamoon 2 are the names of the attacks. In this case, it happened through, again, an email coming in, clicking on an attachment, and then which then installed the malware into the system, and then the malware spread out through the network. And what did it do? In the first example for the oil drilling company, it touched 55,000 PCs, and it completely corrupted and put down 35,000 of those PCs. There was 30,000 of the devices. It took 1 week to reset everything. But most importantly, this oil drilling company was managing 10% of the worldwide oil production. So that means that for a certain period of time, 10% of the worldwide oil production was at risk, having an impact on the prices of oil production. Another example is a movie production company. So similar type of attack, BIOS level type of attack, and this company decided to go completely off the network for about 2 weeks. So again, back to pen and paper. And some of the data that was breached is what you can see here. So what's behind 100 terabytes of data stolen? Lots of different things, but one of the most important things was 2 films that were unreleased. One was just starting to be released, and the estimated impact is $100 million of revenue loss. And there was a second movie that was going to be released, that had been produced, that had been promoted. And in the end, the company decided not to release it. And the estimated damage linked to that is $80 million just for 2 movies. So you may think, okay, BIOS level attacks, that's maybe it happened once, maybe it happened twice. But there's a very recent example of that happening, and it's called LoJacks. So Fancy Bear is the name of the group of hacker that that conducted this attack, and they are a very serious group in the hacking organizations. So what they did is they implemented a BIOS/UEFI attack, hardware level attack, so at the lowest level of your system, and it's one of the most damageable attacks for various reasons. Number one, it's very difficult to detect. As Corbett mentioned earlier on, antivirus will protect and will look at what is happening in your operating system, in your image, but BIOS is below that. So antivirus will not detect BIOS level attacks. Why is it most damageable? So because it's difficult to detect, it's difficult to recover from. You generally need physical intervention to be able to recover from BIOS level attacks. And the third reason is that BIOS level attacks have a very high return on investment for attackers, because they go undetected, and once they are in your BIOS, they basically own your PC. They can do whatever they like. They can access your data, they can erase your data, they can change your data, they can put some other types of malware, and then through the network they access all the other devices. And the worst thing is you don't even know it. You think you're okay, but you don't even know it. And a bit like what I've shared with you earlier on Wannacry, and then there was like a first version of ransomware, and then NotPetya, that was a second version using the same vulnerability. What we expect is that there will be other variants of LoJacks, new variants, more sophisticated. That's what we see from a cybercriminality standpoint as a trend. And we expect new types of rootkits happening. Now, if you want to know how LoJacks actually works, it needs to do 2 things. It needs to inject the malware in the BIOS, and can do this in different ways. Actually, how it was done, information is pretty scarce, but we know that that's one of the things that need to happen. And then it uses a vulnerability of the BIOS from 2015. So that means that to protect against attacks like LoJacks in this very first variant, you need to have a BIOS that is protected with a password, and you need to make sure that your system is updated. So to make sure that you don't have this vulnerability from 2015. Yes, so somebody is mentioning check Asset's white paper about LoJacks. Absolutely. So it is them that pointed out the LoJacks attack. And then what HP did is we used, and we looked at this white paper. We made our own research and our own tests, and we found out that what I'm mentioning here is part of what Asset mentioned as solutions. The other solution is SureStart, HP SureStart. So basically, HP SureStart is a solution that is based on hardware security, and what it does is that it will look constantly at your system. It will check if your system has a correct version of the BIOS or not. If it doesn't, then it will replace it with the authenticate version of the BIOS. So what Asset is mentioning is one of the solutions, but another automated solution is HP SureStart. And Yes, Preston, we will be able to share the research on LoJacks. There is a HP white paper about that. So Michelle, I'll send you this after the call, and if you can include that, that would be great. And this is why we really consider that every device purchase decision is a security decision. What do we mean by that? It's when you're buying a PC or a printer or another device, you're not just buying a configuration. You are buying the fact that you're going to make yourself, your organization, more or less vulnerable to those security threats. Knowingly or unknowingly, of course. But really, security should be a factor of in your purchasing decision right at the time when you're buying, not as an after fact. And to come to a conclusion, a recap really, I will pass it back on to you, Corbett.
Whoopsie. As a call to action, start at the security level. Start at the hardware level. The reason for that is if we don't start at the hardware level, everything that is built on top of our hardware is automatically has a vulnerability built in. We want you to start thinking about your updates, start thinking about doing your updates at not only the operating system level, but also the firmware. If you do a quick scan across your environment, you will see that you have 5 or 6 different types of PCs or printers in your environment. And you will also notice that they're all running a different firmware version. Please go out there and do the basics. Protect the firmware, protect the BIOS. These are the things that everything else is built on top of. Continue to use anti-malware and antivirus. Just make sure that you know what the vulnerabilities are in that type of software, in that approach only. Make sure this is something that your attackers cannot switch off. We are seeing more and more attacks where the first thing that the malware does is switch off the antivirus. When things go wrong, I would love for me to change that to say if things go wrong, but typically it's going to be a case of when things go wrong, make sure you have a process in place to minimize the downtime. How do we recover people? Let me rephrase that. How do we recover people's data as quickly and efficiently as possible? How do we get up and running as quickly as we possibly can? Have a process before all hell breaks loose, so that when things go wrong, you're in a good position. Web browsing and the internet are not going to go away at all. So please make sure that you protect the way folks are browsing the internet. Walk through a basic user one-on-one course on what to download, how to download it, things to be aware of. Do it 2 or 3 times, record it, and share it. Please, this is the quickest and easiest thing for you to do for new hires and for people that have been in the company for a while and think they know everything. Just do user awareness. We really, really need to address this one. Some things cannot be addressed with a technology approach. Visual hacking is real. Visual hacking exists. So please let your folks know that when they are working outside of the office, pay attention. Is there somebody paying a little bit too much attention to what's on your screen? If so, move where you're sitting, shut down your computer, go somewhere else. This is a simple thing that you can do, and it doesn't mean that we're living in a paranoid world. It's just the price of doing business in a digital world. Last thing I want you to be aware of, make sure that you do have company security policies in place, and more importantly, that these policies are being enforced across all devices. All devices. All it takes is for one of your devices to get compromised, and everything else we've done amounts to naught. For folks out there that are non-HP customers, fantastic. My ask to you, whoever is providing you with your existing hardware, challenge them. Tell them that security is a big deal to you and your organization, and ask them, what are they doing to help protect you and the modern mobile workforce that we have today? Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that brings us to the end of our presentation today. I think we can stay online for about another 10 minutes or so to see if there are any other questions that we need to address. Are there any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? So it doesn't look as though there are any other questions. Michelle, should I hand this over to you, or should I just end the call?
I think we will just end the webinar.
Okay.
We can end.
I want to thank you from both Anais and myself. Just thanks for taking the time today. Thanks for spending it with us. And thanks for listening to why we need to focus on protecting our hardware as well. Oh, hold it. Here we go. We have a question here around secure boot. Yes, how can I assist? Can I unmute you by any chance?
Preston, seems we can't hear you. Okay.
Okay, yes, I have seen that in the past. Is that a statement or is that a question? Okay. I believe the issue there is it's based on the Linux distro that you are using. I believe Linux doesn't understand how the secure boot in UEFI works. That is what I've been told, and that's as much research as I've put into it, considering the footprint of Linux in end user devices. But if this is something that you would like to address a little bit further, please feel free to drop either myself or Anais an email. It's firstname.lastname@hp.com, and I'm glad to look into this a little bit more for you. So Corbett.Hoxland@hp.com, and we can have a look into this for you. See if there's some sort of workaround, and you can tell me what kind of distro of Linux you are using. And thank you so much. Actually, that was probably the easier thing to do. Thank you, Michelle. Damn it. Folks, if there are any other questions, please make it heard now or forever hold your peace. If there are no other questions, please enjoy the rest of your week. Have a fantastic holiday season if you celebrate it, and all the best for 2019. Perfect. I'm going to probably butcher this name, Presian. If you want to drop me an email, let's absolutely continue this conversation. Folks, thanks so much. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon. Bye, folks.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.